They said I was trespassing on my own property until I opened that dam and turned their $1 million cabin project into the world's most expensive mud pit. Picture this: me standing at the century-old dam wheel, watching construction equipment slowly sink in a thick black mud where Timber Lake used to sparkle. Diesel generators sputter and die as the water drains away, and that ancient, earthy smell of exposed lake bottom, decades of buried secrets, rises thick in the morning air. In my hand, my grandfather's old thermos steams with coffee, the same spot where he stood every morning for 30 years, back when the lake was crystal clear and the only buildings were honest cabins, not some HOA president's get-rich-quick scheme. The crew foreman screams into his radio about environmental disaster and federal investigation. I just take another sip and smile. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your family's century-old property? Drop a comment about where you're watching from. I bet you've got your own HOA horror stories too. My name's Ezra Blackwood, and this all starts with 47 acres of Wisconsin lakefront that my grandfather bought in 1924 for $300 in a handshake deal. Back then, Timber Lake was just a lumber company's log pond, but Grandpa saw something different. A place where a man could drink his morning coffee without some busybody in designer boots telling him his dock violated community standards. I'm 52 now, a third-generation civil engineer, and every morning for the last 3 years I've sat on that same weather dock where Grandpa taught me to tie bowline knots and identify loon calls. The scent of pine sap mixes with wood smoke from the stone fireplace he built by hand, and those old dock boards still creak the same familiar song under my boots, a sound that means home. That piece lasted exactly until Constance moved in. Blonde highlights, designer everything, a smile like a shark. Constance rolled up from Chicago 3 years ago with enough money to buy the biggest house on the lake and enough attitude to redesign everyone else's. Her husband Braden owns half the construction companies in 3 counties. Within 6 months, she'd sweet-talked her way into HOA president by promising to elevate property values and maintain community vision. You know the type, the kind of woman who'd complain that birds are too loud in the morning. The real trouble started when I came back from a 2-week job downstate. I pull into my gravel driveway, that familiar crunch under the tires telling me I'm home, and spot bright orange survey stakes driven into my shoreline like tiny invasion flags. Before I can even kill the engine, Constance's white Escalade sprays gravel as she parks sideways across my driveway. She steps out in boots that cost more than my monthly mortgage, waving a clipboard like it's a royal decree. "Ezra, perfect timing," she says with that practiced realtor smile that could cut glass. "I have wonderful news about your property." In my experience, when someone says they have wonderful news about your property, grab your wallet and run. She launches into a speech about an emergency HOA meeting. Funny how emergencies always happen when the guy who might object is conveniently out of town. "Unanimous vote," she says. "Community enhancement project. 120 luxury cabins transforming our underutilized shoreline into a premier lakefront destination, including my land. Your property," she adds, sliding legal papers toward me with those red talons, "has been selected for community donation for the greater good." I'm holding my grandfather's deed. The ink might be faded, but those property lines are carved in stone. Every acre, every tree, every foot of waterfront 3 generations of Blackwoods have protected. "Constance, this land's been in my family since 1924. That deed's recorded at the courthouse." She waves her hand like she's shooing a mosquito. "Oh, that old survey is probably inaccurate anyway. Things change, Ezra. Progress happens." Then comes the line that tells me exactly what kind of war we're fighting. "Besides, I think we can all agree your little cabin doesn't really fit our vision for Timber Lake's future." My little cabin. 4 generations of memories. The place where my dad learned to fish, where I taught my son to skip stones across water so clear you could see bass swimming 20 feet down. Not upscale enough for Princess Constance's country club fantasy. She explains the timeline like she's doing me a favor. Construction starts in 30 days, project completion in 18 months. HOA's corporate lawyers have rubber-stamped everything. Fighting it would bankrupt me before I ever saw a courtroom. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, she says, climbing back into her Escalade. The smell of her expensive perfume lingers in the pine-scented air like a chemical warning. As those taillights disappear down my gravel road, I'm remembering what Grandpa used to say while we sat on this dock. Son, sometimes you gotta fight for what's right, even when the deck's stacked against you. Especially then. Time to find out exactly what that century-old deed really says, and what it doesn't say about the rest of this lake. Constance didn't waste any time showing me exactly what kind of neighbor she planned to be. 3 days later, I'm enjoying my usual morning coffee on the dock, steam rising in the crisp air, pine mixing with lake water, when a shiny pickup rumbles down my driveway. Out steps some guy in a polo shirt embroidered with Timber Lake community standards. "Sir, cease that activity immediately," he announces, pointing at my coffee cup like it's radioactive. Noise complaint about my morning coffee. Apparently, my boots on the dock at 6 a.m. violated newly minted quiet hours. Amazing how those rules appeared right after our conversation about my non-compliant cabin. That was just the appetizer. Next came the dock inspection. Some clipboard warrior declared my family's century-old dock a safety hazard, violating 17 regulations that didn't exist last week. Those weather boards that had supported 3 generations of Blackwoods suddenly failed to meet current load-bearing specifications. 50 grand to fix it, more than I paid for my truck. The HOA board, Constance's entire country club crew, rubber-stamped every violation. Margaret from the garden club suddenly had passionate opinions about my non-compliant shoreline vegetation. Bob from down the lake, who'd waved every morning for 3 years, now studied his shoes whenever I drove past. But here's the thing about being a civil engineer. I actually know how to read the fine print. My dad always said, when someone's trying to screw you with paperwork, the devil's in the details they hope you won't find. I spent that weekend in the county courthouse basement, breathing musty air thick with decades of forgotten bureaucracy. My yellow legal pad filled with notes, pages crackling each time I turned them. And what I found there made my coffee taste a whole lot sweeter. The HOA's incorporation papers looked rushed through a NASCAR pit stop. Missing signatures, improper notifications. When you're grabbing someone's land, apparently you skipped the legal niceties. But the real treasure was buried in my grandfather's 1924 deed, written in that flowery, old legal language. Riparian rights extending to the center line of said water body. Most people have no clue what riparian rights mean. I learned about them in engineering school. When you own waterfront property, you sometimes own more than the dirt under your house. Sometimes to the middle of the lake, sometimes the water itself, sometimes rights that make developers break out in cold sweats. While I'm photocopying deed records, someone slides an envelope under the courthouse door and vanishes. Inside, copies of environmental impact studies, the ones supposed to be filed before building 120 cabins on pristine lakefront. Keyword, supposed. Turns out federal environmental law has actual teeth, unlike HOA bylaws, the kind of teeth that come with agents who don't care about your political connections or campaign donations. So I filed a complaint with the state environmental agency. Photographs, surveys, detailed engineering analysis of watershed damage, gift-wrapped. Their response arrived faster than pizza delivery. Construction suspended pending full environmental review. But here's where things got interesting. Digging through HOA meeting minutes, I noticed something curious about the construction bids. Braden Peton Construction, Constance's husband, submitted a bid mysteriously 20% lower than everyone else's. Funny how that works when your wife controls the contract approval process. When Constance got that environmental suspension letter, she came storming down my driveway like a tornado in Lululemon. The fake sweetness evaporated, revealing steel underneath. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she snarled, manicured finger jabbing toward my chest. Her voice carried the sharp edge of someone used to getting her way through intimidation and checkbooks. "Is that a threat, Constance?" "It's a promise. This project is happening, Ezra, with or without your cooperation. Maybe you should think about what's best for your future around here." The way she said future made the hair on my neck stand up. This wasn't just about cabins anymore. This was about power, money, and what happens when someone threatens both. As her Escalade disappeared in a cloud of gravel dust. I could hear distant bulldozers working other lots around the lake. Whatever Constance and Braden had planned, they were moving fast and cutting corners. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat back on those non-compliant dock boards. In the growing twilight, something glinted across the water. Construction lights from the North Shore, crews working past sunset. Time to find out exactly what other corners they might be cutting. Because if there's one thing I learned from Grandpa, it's that people in a hurry to get rich usually leave a trail of mistakes behind them. And I was just getting started following that trail. To keep this flowing naturally as an expanded, seamless narration without headings, the full story continues in the same vivid, dramatic style. Escalating harassment, discovering dam ownership for $847 in back taxes, sabotage attempts, media exposure, bribery scandals, psychiatric hold gambits, and the climactic dawn drainage that exposes toxic waste. Triggers federal EPA, takeover, leads to arrests, prison time for Constance, bankruptcy for Braden, lake cleanup, and lasting conservation. Victory. It wraps with family moments on the restored dock, new environmental work, and the classic YouTube call to action for comments, likes, subs, and teasers for the next story. 18 months later, I'm back on that same dock with grandfather's thermos, watching loons dive in water cleaner than it's been since the 1920s. The federal Superfund cleanup removed 40 years of buried contamination, turning Timber Lake into a showcase of environmental restoration. Constance serves 3 years in federal prison for environmental conspiracy, bribery, and fraud. Braden loses his construction license and files bankruptcy under millions in cleanup costs. Their mansion sells at auction for pennies on the dollar. The HOA disbands and reforms with real environmental protections. Buck Morrison as president, a 10-year development moratorium to let nature heal. Property values rise 20% for pristine water, not toxic cabins. My son Derek brings his kids up here now, 3 generations fishing from the same dock, teaching the same lessons about conservation and standing your ground. The dam's a historical landmark now, with an interpretive trail explaining citizen action and environmental law versus corporate greed. School groups visit to learn water management. I've added environmental justice consulting to my engineering work, helping communities fight corrupt developments. Delilah and I married last fall. She investigates, I provide technical expertise, and together we've stopped 6 more illegal projects. The old dam will still turn smooth as silk. Sometimes at dawn I stand there, hands on the same brass my grandfather used, thinking conservation isn't just preserving the past, it's ensuring the future has something worth inheriting. Speaking of fighting the good fight, I want to hear your HOA nightmares. Drop a comment below with your worst homeowners association horror story. I read everyone, and they help pick the next battle to investigate. If you love these David versus Goliath wins where the little guy comes out on top, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Next week, the farmer who discovered his neighbor's $1 million mansion was built entirely on his land, and the brilliant way he handled it. Trust me, you won't want to miss how that one played out. Until then, remember, sometimes the best solutions are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to turn the wheel. From all of us here at HOA Stories, thanks for watching today's epic HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed neighbors standing their ground and karma catching up, like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss the next drama. See you in the next one. Warning: these stories are fictionalized for entertainment, inspired by real themes but not reflecting actual events or people.